Welcome to the Unhurried Living Podcast. We're sharing leadership conversations to help you develop unhurried rhythms of rest and work. We're helping you overcome hurry and make time for what matters most. And now, enjoy today's episode. Hey friends, welcome to episode 260 of the podcast. My name's Alan, and I'm so glad you've joined me here. I'm hopeful that our time together will help you rediscover an unhurried way of life and leadership. And I'm so glad to be back from our summer break. For the third year in a row, Jim and I took the month of July as a mini sabbatical. We were able to enjoy time with family, spend some time in spiritual retreat, and visit some beautiful locations. We're coming back refreshed and ready for a new season of life and work. And so as we launch this new season, I'm so pleased to be able to share a conversation I had a little while back with Os Guinness about his book, The Great Quest. It is such a timely and important message for us. So many are struggling to find meaning deep enough to sustain them. Os has written a very helpful guide to taking this journey to deeper purpose. Let me tell you a little bit more about our guest today. Os Guinness is an author and social critic, great-great-great-grandson of Arthur Guinness, the Dublin brewer. He was born in China in World War II, where his parents were medical missionaries. A witness to the climax of the Chinese Revolution in 1949, he was expelled with many other foreigners in 1951 and returned to Europe, where he was educated in England. He completed his undergraduate degree at the University of London and his DPhil in the social sciences from Oriel College, Oxford. Os has written and edited more than 30 books, including The Call, Time for Truth, Unspeakable, A Free People's Suicide, The Global Public Square, Last Call for Liberty, Carpe Diem Redeemed, and the Magna Carta of Humanity. Os has spoken at many of the world's major universities and has spoken widely to political and business conferences around the world. He lives with his wife, Jenny, in the Washington, D.C. area. Now, if you're a new listener, welcome to the podcast. If you find these episodes helpful, please follow, rate, and review. And be sure to share this podcast with your friends. Now, let's dive into my conversation with Os Guinness. On today's Unhurried Living podcast, I'm pleased to have Os Guinness, author of The Great Quest. Os, thanks so much for joining me for this conversation.
My privilege. Thank you, Alan.
Well, I would love to start our conversation by just asking if you would share a little bit about how this particular book came to be. What was it that inspired or moved you to write it?
Well, ever since I came to faith, which was a long time ago in 1960, the thing that's been strongest in my heart is making sense of the gospel to those outside the faith, trying to make sense of the world to people inside the church and to others too. So those two things, you might say, apologetics and analysis. So it's always been a great joy to share the faith as best I can with those outside. And that's what this book is. It's not an argument for faith. It's a description of the journey that thinking people can take.
I really appreciate that. I sensed that it was a journey that you were seeking to invite us to highlight for those of us to see the beauty of it, the goodness of it.
No, that's exactly right. I've had the privilege of talking to thousands of people over the years of my own faith, starting at L'Abri in the 1960s, where many, many seekers came through. And so I've learned to know how best to put it to people.
Oh, I love hearing about that. Well, the subtitle of your book perhaps captures the spirit of, I think, what you've written, which is to say, an invitation to an examined life, and a sure path to meaning. I wonder if you could actually, what it leads me to as far as the question is, I wonder if you can talk with us a bit about what might be some of the costs of living an unexamined life.
Well, that's the most famous classical saying outside the Bible.
Yeah.
But if Socrates is right, and that, of course, came in his final speech, most people are leading unexamined lives which he didn't consider worth living.
Yeah.
They just haven't thought through the meaning of life, the purpose of life, and who they are. And of course, it's only when we discover what life means and what our individual purpose is and so on that we really enter into the fullness of life.
Mm.
You know the old YOLO saying, the YOLO philosophy, you only live once. But the original philosophy was you only live once, if then. In other words, a lot of people waste their one-time round by not thinking through what it all means. And so that's what I'm trying to speak to encourage people to search. And then, of course, to find, but to begin by searching.
Well, I would love to hear you talk a little more about the relationship between this invitation to live a more examined life and finding a sense of joyful or hopeful meaning in life, which I think a lot of people are really hungry for.
Well, I try and set out in the book the different stages or phases that people go through. But your question really focuses on what people discover, which is the answer they choose, which is very much the main question in the second phase, stage 2. Stage 1 is a time for questions. Stage 2, a time for answers. And you look at all the answers on offer in our world today, and they all lead in very, very different directions. So as I often put it, the differences make a difference. So if you choose the Eastern answer, Hinduism, Buddhism, the New Age, and things like that, you come out with a very, very different view of happiness and so on. Or you choose the secularist answer, you come out again with a very different answer. Everything is do it yourself. No God, no purpose, no meaning written into the universe. So if you want meaning and purpose, do it yourself. And, as I was a student in London University, we had Bertrand Russell. And his great picture was always Atlas, the Greek giant who carried his own world on his own shoulders. And then essentially that's atheism, that's secularism. Do it yourself. It's all up to you. Now, when you're in your teens and 20s, early 30s, that sounds great. Yeah. Complete autonomy. But actually, the burden of that is quite something as you realize going on. And it's not a very satisfying answer. Whereas the third family of faith, the biblical, Jewish and Christian above all, you have a very different answer. It's not just happiness, but joy.
Yeah. I love that distinction. It seems to me joy is something that arises from within me. It works in any setting. Happiness, things have to sort of go just right to be able to find yourself landing there occasionally.
Yeah, no, you're right. Pleasure is a matter of our five senses, the taste and touch of things and so on. Happiness, as you say rightly, is circumstances. Are they bullish or bearish, favorable or unfavorable? But joy is quite different. And that's why for C.S. Lewis, it was literally a signal of transcendence. In other words, it's not just, as you put it, something that bubbles up inside us. It's something quite incredible. As Nietzsche says, joy wills eternity, deep eternity. And so Lewis, when he had these experiences of signals of joy, signals of transcendence, it punctured his atheism. I actually have a second book called Signals of Transcendence. And the common link between all of these is the signal, like joy in Lewis's case, punctures what he believed before, in his case, his atheism, and it points to something which, if true, would make all the difference. And so a person who's heard the beep, beep, beep of the signal sets out as a searcher, a seeker.
I love that. I have your book, Signals of Transcendence. I wonder if we could take a little off ramp for just a moment. Could you talk about that book and a little bit about what it is and what we might discover in reading that book?
Well, the two books are really companions.
Yeah.
So The Great Quest is a description of the journey, a seeker's journey for a rational and a responsible faith. Signals of Transcendence is different. It's not an argument at all or even a description. It's the story of just 10 people, 10 different stories, some well-known, some unknown, of people who've had these signals, some very positive, like Lewis's joy. What could be more positive? Some very negative, like W.H. Auden and the horror of evil in World War II. But in each case, that's what it did. Punctured what they used to believe and pointed towards something else, which, if true, would make all the difference. So they set out to be seekers. Yeah, as I browsed the table of contents of that one, it made me think of your chapter, Jumpstarting the Journey, those moments that stimulate or provoke or awaken, or I'm sure other words too, us to the fact of a journey and to the impulse to step into that journey. Can you say more about that? Well, the great thing about the signals is that they're stage one. They get people thinking, a time for questions. Because until people reach stage one and they have questions that turn them into seekers, they're satisfied, maybe convinced, rationally, maybe complacent, emotionally, but they're happy with what they believe, so they don't particularly think or care. Stage one, the questions break in and call them into question. Life becomes a question, and they know they've got to look for something deeper and more adequate than they have. And that's the importance, because, we're in a world, Alan, as you know well, our consumer world, incredibly comfortable. For most people, middle class or above. So the effect is we have too much to live with and too little to live for. And so a lot of people simply don't think through the meaning of life to their own deprivation. And that's what the challenge is, get people to think enough and care enough to start to search. Yeah. Well, as you talk about that, I think of something you said, which is that too many of us are choosing distraction over, seeking meaning. I wonder if you can say more about that. It certainly seems to describe the culture I'm witnessing. Well, if you start thinking, if faith is that important, which I'm saying it is, and almost everyone, if they stop to think, would agree, the meaning of life is incredibly important. You can't play a game without knowing what the game is, or get into a film halfway through wondering what you're looking at, and so on. Meaning and purpose are incredibly important. But if that's so, the obvious question is, why aren't more people thinking more of the time? And there are two main questions or answers to that question. The first is the one you mentioned, which actually comes from the great French mathematician and physicist Blaise Pascal. And his word was diversion. In other words, people surround themselves with busy, entertaining distractions, which keep their mind off ultimate things. And so you think in his world, that was the rich salon gambler and so on. In our world, it's everyone with a social media. I mean, just think how you can divert yourself, distract yourself happily all day long on your cell phone. Yeah. And things like that have been called weapons of mass distraction because they stop people thinking and caring. Yeah. The other reason is what's called bargaining. That's rather different. And bargaining is more, yes, it's very important, but later. And when I've graduated, when my kids are a little bit older, when the mortgage is paid off, when I've retired and have time to think, later, but suddenly there's no more later. As Jesus told in the story of the rich man, the farmer, you fool, tonight your soul is required of you. Now, of course, in our Western literature, that's created the figure of the Faust, who is so ambitious and striving and hardworking. He always wants more. He's not satisfied with coming up against death. He wants to bargain with the devil to have more time. But of course, as anyone's read Marlowe's Faust or Goethe's Faust, the devil has read the small print and Faust hasn't. And death comes. And so bargaining doesn't work any more than diversion works. And the challenge is to get people thinking and caring enough while they have all the time in the world.
And yeah, well, as you write the book, you hinted earlier about these phases of the journey. Can you sort of highlight those phases and maybe talk a bit about this journey into which you are inviting us?
Well, phase one, as I've said, is a time for questions, and that's the beginning of the search, because questions constitute the seeker. Stage two, we touched briefly on that, a time for answers.
Yeah.
Not quite as obvious as it seems. For example, there are 1,001 answers in the room, you might think. But what boils it down is the fact there are only so many families of faiths. By that, I mean faiths that have a common source of ultimate reality, so they have a family resemblance.
Yeah.
So you can take, say, Hinduism, I mentioned, Buddhism, the Reform movement, New Age movements in California, where you are. They all go back to an impersonal ground of being.
Yeah.
Or you look at the secularist family of faiths, atheists, materialists, naturalists. They all go back ultimately to chance, plus time and energy and matter, and so on. Whereas the biblical, which is supremely the Judaism and the Christian faith, go back to an infinite, personal, transcendent God. Yeah. And when you see how they start differently, the answers flow down profoundly differently. So, for instance, you can't find a high view of human nature in Hinduism or in secularism. You can't find freedom, for example. Our atheist friends, we are determinists. They're determinists, and we're determined. Freedom is alone the fruit of the product of the biblical family of faiths. The human beings are made in the image of God and have real choice. In other words, the difference is make a difference, and people, the searcher's got to say, here is my question, whatever it is for a particular searcher. And then they look to see how different families of faiths answer it differently. And the key question in that stage too is adequacy and illumination. Does it throw light on what I'm looking for? And is it really a solid answer?
Yeah.
The third stage is a time for evidences, which is one a lot of people miss out today. In other words, it's not enough to say, yes, this is attractive. The question is it true?
Yeah.
And that's a very key one today, particularly in the postmodern age, which tends to deny truth altogether. And then the fourth stage is a time for commitments, because it's not enough even to say, yes, this is illuminating. Yes, I believe this is true. No, the question is, do we have a commitment to it so it becomes real for us in experience? So thinkers have to go through, or normal people have to go through all four of those stages.
That's really helpful. Yeah, you mentioned that evidence doesn't seem to be highly valued in at least the way some people think, this postmodern. I think of Dallas Willard, who would sometimes say truth or reality is what you bump into, when you're wrong, which I've always thought was there's something substantial and real. It's not just my opinion, your opinion, who's got more political power. There's something essential happening.
Well, that's exactly right. But of course, as you look at, is it true? There are broadly two ways of going about it. You can look in a big picture way to see if an answer has coherence. So an example of that was G.K. Chesterton. He became a seeker because although he was very pessimistic about the world, he said, as he put it, he was stopped in his tracks by a dandelion. In other words, in a world of darkness and nihilism and pessimism, there was beauty. And how did you explain both the dark and the light, ruin and the beauty? And so for him, it was when it came across the Christian faith, suddenly saw it fitted everything. It was a big picture fit. It was the key that fitted the lock. And his excitement when he describes it in his book, Orthodoxy, is scintillating writing. Now, the second way of looking at truth is a close-up detail way, as you said, evidences.
Yeah.
And a good example of that was C.S. Lewis, who after 10 years and more of searching was challenged by an atheist friend of his at Magdalen College to look at the Gospels. And he immediately saw that the average person's view of the gospel, Jesus, the great teacher, was wrong. Yes, he was an incredible teacher, love your enemies and so on. But he said things which, if not true, would make him an egomaniac. And so he had to challenge himself. How did you explain the tough evidences he found in the Gospels? So for him, it was that close-up way.
That's so powerful. I'm wondering, as you continue your quest, what has been particularly encouraging or inspiring or stimulating for you at this point in the journey?
Well, Alan, I followed the Lord for more than 60 years. And I remember a saying that I read the first year I came to faith in 1960, which was a little remark in George Whitfield's journals where he just says, I am never better, if I got it right, I'm never better than when I'm on the full stretch for God. In other words, when you take your Christian faith too easily and don't stretch it or put it out on the line, it'll quickly grow stale. So I've always made a point, for example, when in the 1960s, so many Westerners were going east. I went to study under a guru in Rishikesh. And Francis Schaeffer, whom I knew well then, he said to me, it's subtle and very spiritually powerful. If your little boat is going to sink, get out. It was tough. I didn't enter into the Hindu worship, but I went to the lectures and so on. And it was very challenging. But the day I suddenly saw the profound differences between Hinduism and the gospel, I was filled with joy and gratitude, and my faith was immeasurably deepened. In the same way, almost every year I read something of Friedrich Nietzsche.
Really?
The grand old iconoclast, the strongest atheist writer there is, probably. It's bracing.
Oh, boy.
You take him on, and by force of contrast, you see the wonder of the gospel all over again. So that's been very helpful to me. Now, currently, I'm living in Washington, D.C., and we're tackling things like cultural Marxism and so on.
Oh, boy.
Thank God for the incredible contrast between wokeism and all that's behind it and the glory of the way the scriptures and the gospel say tackle injustice. They both care about injustice, but the two approaches are different as night and day. In other words, one of my favorite phrases is contrast is the mother of clarity. When you see the difference the gospel makes from the alternatives, you come back praising the Lord with a deeper and more confident faith.
I love the sound of that, especially your comment about contrast, that the goodness and the rootedness of the gospel stands tall against other options.
Very much so.
Well, I wonder if, as we close our conversation, if you would be willing just to share a word of encouragement to our listeners, maybe in the spirit of this quest into which you've invited us.
Well, let me broaden it a bit, Alan. I was a boy. I was 7 when the Chinese Revolution came to its climax, and I was there for the first 2 years under the reign of terror. So my family had seen war, plague, violence, death, corruption all around us, and then the reign of terror, which is truly terrifying. But I often say, in all that time, I never saw my parents' faith waver once. And if you distilled what my father's attitude was, I would put it like this. It's not exactly his words, but this is the essence. God is greater than all. The Lord can be trusted in all situations. Have faith in God. Have no fear. Now, here we are, Alan. I'm writing a book now on the crisis of the West. We're facing what's called a civilizational moment. Every civilization has an inspiration. Obviously, the Western civilization comes out of the gospel and the scriptures. But there's a point in every civilization when it loses touch with its inspiration.
Yeah.
And that's why every other civilization is either in a museum or in ruins. Now, what happens then? Well, here's the point, historians say. When they lose touch with their inspiration, the civilization has three broad choices: renewal, replacement, or decline.
Oh, boy.
In other words, you look at the West today, or even say America, clearly the Christian faith rooted in Judaism is behind the West and certainly behind America. And many, many people, above all the intelligentsia, have rejected it. Will there be a renewal? Is there a replacement? Or the West and America will decline. But at such a time, many Christians, their hearts fail them for fear. And that's why my father's attitude, I think, is so important. God is greater than all. The Lord can be trusted in every situation. Have faith in him. Have no fear.
I so appreciate that. And I appreciate your voice of tested trust and your father's, wise, simple, solid words. What a gift. I really appreciate that. Well, again, today, my guest has been Os Guinness, and we've been talking about his book, The Great Quest. Os, it's really been a great pleasure to have this time with you.
Well, my joy. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation as much as I did. In the next few episodes, I'll be talking with authors Justin Whitmel Early, Lacey Finn Borgo, and Bishop Todd Hunter. I'll also be sharing a series of leadership teachings, beginning with episodes like Is Your Retreat Hurried or Unhurried? And The Practice of Leadership Journaling. I can't wait to share those with you. If you'd like to receive more help from Unhurried Living, I invite you to join our Unhurried daily email list. For 40 days, we'll send you a brief daily email that offers personal reflections from life and Scripture to help you take the next step in following Jesus' unhurried way. You can sign up on our website at unhurriedliving.com. We are honored to encourage thousands of leaders just like you. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to the Unhurried Living podcast. Join us next time to learn more about following the genius of Jesus' unhurried way of life and leadership.